Auburn fell on Saturday to #1 Georgia, 27-20, in a game where the Tigers led for more than 3 quarters. In Hugh Freeze's first year, it's about growth. And the best way to grow a program is through recruiting. And on Saturday, the Tigers hosted more than 200 recruits that saw the potential in this Auburn program. All right, so we're going to go behind the scenes of Auburn's big recruiting weekend in this video. But before we start, Auburn fans, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to grow this thing. You're passionate about recruiting, so are we. Go ahead and subscribe. All right, let's bring on Jeffrey Lee, Auburn insider from Auburn Live. Jeffrey, Auburn is not messing around. They didn't just bring some commits on campus. They got a bunch of flip targets. They brought 4 flip targets on campus. We're going to talk about those guys in a minute, but first, 4-star wide receiver Nik Carr. He decommitted from Georgia last Sunday and showed up to the Plains on Saturday, his very first visit after decommitting. So he's reopened his recruitment. What are you hearing coming out of this first back on the market visit for Nik Carr?
Sure. A lot of positive things, especially for this Auburn fan base right now. You saw yesterday or Saturday against Georgia, one of the big things and issues Auburn faced on offense was the lack of production at wide receiver, a lot of drop balls. And, for a game that you're going to have a bunch of top wide receiver targets at, I guess if you're going to have a game where you have drop balls, that's the one where you were so close to beating the #1 team in the country. And a big reason for that was, dropped balls by the wide receivers. So, Nik Carr saw that, Ryan Williams saw that, Perry Thompson was there. So a lot of wide receivers saw that. But Nik, he's had a really good relationship with Hugh Freeze, with Marcus Davis, with Javon Reed. So getting him there shortly after his decommitment was big and really made some headway there. He's going to come back for an official visit later in the fall, maybe even in December. So Auburn certainly solidified themselves as a true contender for Nik Carr.
Well, we've had about a week to kind of dissect his recruitment since he decommitted from Georgia. So we know Auburn's in it. Obviously, they're in it. They get the first unofficial visit since he put himself back on the market. But who else do you think is in this recruitment besides Auburn?
I think it starts with Miami, and I think you work your way north to Florida State, Penn State, Tennessee. He said yesterday after his visit to Auburn that he's going to Penn State for an official visit October the 14th. I don't think they're a school that had been mentioned much in his recruitment, but certainly Penn State's getting in there as well. But you got to think Miami is up near the top, Florida State, Auburn, and then you've got Tennessee and Penn State there as well. So I'm looking at those 5 schools as the true contenders, at least right now, for Nik Carr.
All right, yeah, we got a ways to go with Nik Carr because he's not in any rush to decide. So we'll kind of put him to the side for a minute. Now, the next 4 names, these guys, they were supposed to be done with their recruitment. They've already committed, and I'm talking about Ryan Williams, 2025, 5-star wide receiver committed to Alabama, 4-star edge Jamont Waller committed to UF, 4-star safety Zaquan Patterson committed to Miami, and then 3-star offensive lineman Khalil House committed to Stanford. They were all at Auburn's game on Saturday. Let's start with Ryan Williams. I mean, he's no stranger to Auburn's campus. This wasn't his first visit. What's your take? What's your read on where Ryan Williams and Auburn stand?
Well, Ryan is a smart kid, very smart kid. He knows, he says all the right things. Now, he was decked out in his Auburn gear. His father obviously played for Auburn 15 years ago. So there's a lot of Auburn in his family. And, he was one of the best interviews that I had after the game Saturday. Wow. And that he was saying, they're playmakers away from beating the #1 team in the country. And, basically they're guys like me away from beating Georgia. So, he says he's locked in with Alabama. He visited Auburn. He'll continue to visit Auburn. He'll be back for the Iron Bowl. And, that's going to be a guy to kind of keep an eye on. If you're an Auburn fan, you almost want to say, I'll believe it when I see it. But, we saw that with DeMarcus Riddick. We saw it with Perry Thompson. He's just one of those guys that Hugh Freeze is working extremely hard on. Marcus Davis is working extremely hard on. And I think they've positioned themselves to be in the race. They're certainly, if I'm Alabama, I would be a little bit concerned about Auburn at this point.
Interesting. Well, I also want to talk to you about edge Jamont Waller. This is one that you and I have kind of off the record, off of this show, have realized that Auburn has been trying to flip him from Florida. And now that he showed up on campus, we can talk about it. So what is your read on where things stand between Jamont Waller, who's committed to Florida, and Auburn?
Certainly trending up towards Auburn. I mean, Auburn is, you'd like to believe if you're an Auburn fan that your trajectory of the program is up. You saw that Saturday against Georgia. And then you look across, or you look down south and you see Florida, struggling, and you got to think that way somewhat in the recruitments of these guys. But the need on defense and Auburn's success on defense with the guys that they've had is really it's certain something Jamont is certainly noticing. And there's a big connection there with Ron Roberts. There's a big connection there with Jeremy Garrett. And I think getting him back on campus after he's pretty quiet. He's pretty quiet. He doesn't do a lot of interviews. So getting him back on campus says a lot. And he declined an interview, which I respected very much so. But, his actions there says a lot more than his words.
Have they gotten him on campus for an official yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
He came
that
for
could be used down the road. We'll see what happens with Jamont Waller. Now, there's another interesting commitment that was on campus, and that's safety Zaquan Patterson. And it's interesting because he's committed to Miami. Now, I know Auburn, FSU, Florida, everybody was kind of involved with Zaquan when he committed to Miami, and he did say at the time he was going to continue to take those visits, and he stayed true to that word. He showed up at Auburn. What are you hearing from Zaquan after this visit?
Again, all the right things that you would want if you're an Auburn fan. I thought one of the interesting things that he said was after he committed, a lot of the schools, Michigan, Florida State, they all kind of backed off. But one school that didn't back off was Auburn, was Hugh Freeze. It was Zack Ethridge. They've continued to recruit him. He said, I talked to Auburn, as much, if not more, than I do Miami. So Auburn's, if anything, they've ramped up the recruitment of him. He came to 4 games last year. He came Saturday to the Georgia game and said, I just felt a different vibe at Auburn this time. And I'm definitely coming back for an official visit. I haven't set that date, but I will be back for an official visit. And right now it's Miami and Auburn. It's basically what he said. So, again, if I'm Miami, I'm sweating it. I'm sweating it, him visiting Auburn as much as he has been and will.
All right, another one. We just got to see how that one plays out. Now, 3-star offensive lineman Khalil House, he was on campus. He's committed to Stanford, but he's from Georgia. How much of a priority is he for this Auburn staff right now?
He's a very high priority for Auburn. He has been, and he probably will be. Auburn. He was, when he made his commitment, he was choosing between Auburn and Stanford. Mm-hmm. Everybody, including myself, thought it was going to be Auburn, and behind the scenes, it was Auburn. I was talking with Khalil. He was set to go to Auburn, but that Stanford education really played a role in his decision. Now, will that hold? I think if anybody is to keep an eye on as far as a flip target, I think he is one. I think Hugh Freeze and those guys have stayed on him. Jake Thornton, getting him back on Saturday was a big deal, and I would be keeping a very close eye on Khalil House. If I were making a mock class, I would have Khalil House in Auburn's class.
Wow. All right. So that could turn out to be a really important visit. Now, another really important target that was on campus that's not committed anywhere is LJ McCrae. He is a newly minted 5-star for On3. 2 weeks ago, he got the bump along with 4 others. Now, LJ McCrae's recruitment is already a tight battle between the 3 in-state Florida schools and Georgia. And now he shows up at Auburn, and Auburn's always kind of been on the outside looking in. But after this visit, do you put Auburn up with those other teams in his top group?
Not yet. And don't get me wrong, he had a fantastic time. He was one of the guys I talked to after the game who was he was amazed, is the words that he used. He was amazed at the crowd, the atmosphere. He'd been to Auburn. He'd never been to a game at Auburn. So to see that electric atmosphere, that environment, that game, the defensive line for Auburn played lights out. And, his relationship with Jeremy Garrett is very big here. It's keeping Auburn in that top, I would say, the second tier of schools for him. But they're inching away with him. They're still in this very much so. And getting him back on campus is something that they're going to prioritize. And he said, I will be back. So that Iron Bowl at the end of November, all these guys that came today or came Saturday and saying they're coming back, that's the game that they're going to be back to.
All right, well, we'll see how it shakes out. LJ McCrae, definitely one of the most coveted prospects in the country, is at Auburn this weekend. There is a ton going on, and Auburn Live has all the recruiting coverage right there. We only scratched the surface on this video. Jeffrey Lee from Auburn Live, thank you for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
Appreciate you, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that content, be sure to subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We have a new page dedicated only to recruiting. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now.